Hi, everybody. This is a quick explanation about point of view. That was part of the reading that you had. It's on pages 146 to 151 of the Norton, that is the scans that I have there. So I just want to kind of explain point of view because it's a rather difficult concept sometimes to understand. What we mean by point of view is who is telling the story and how they're going to be telling it. So some of the main kinds of point of view that we have are, first off, the first person point of view. First person point of view is when somebody tells the story and they say, here's what happened to me. I did this. I was walking down the street. I saw a dog. The dog bit me, right? That is all the stuff that is happening to me. And we could also have a story that's told in the third person. We could tell the same story in the third person where we could say, he was walking down the street. He saw a dog. The dog bit him. Either one, on some level, we get the same basic information. However, when we have different points of view, we might have access to other subtler information. That is, if, let's say, we have a first-person narrator, somebody's telling a story about themselves. So if we go back to, let's say, I'm a mad dog biting myself for sympathy, or The Lesson. In both of those stories, those characters are talking about themselves, and in the process of talking about themselves, they can tell us things about what they're thinking. We can get inside of their heads and understand how specifically they might be thinking about a particular story, the particular issue, because they can tell us, right? Here's what I thought about. We could have similar kinds of information in the third person, but it's a little bit different because if somebody says, here's what he was thinking about, we're not as connected to that as we would be if somebody said, here's what I was thinking about. And so just kind of keep that in mind, that it kind of changes the nature of the information that we get. In a first person, we're inside of somebody's head, so we can understand exactly what they're thinking. We can hear it on some level as they're thinking it. But from a third person, instead of being inside their head, we're going to be told that information, which means, again, we're not as connected to that. First person narrators also can tell us what they want us to know. They can say, I'm telling the story, and so I'm going to tell you only the things that might make me look good. Things that might make me look bad, I'm not going to tell you about. A third-person narrator might go through and say, this person would only want you to know these things, but since I'm a third-person narrator standing outside of the story, I can tell you things that they wouldn't want to tell you otherwise. So kind of keep that in mind and think about how that relates to the story How to Date a Brown Girl, Black Girl, White Girl, or Haffy. That story is in the second person. That is, instead of having the narrator talk about him or herself, or instead of having somebody outside of the story talk about the character, in How to Date a Brown Girl, the narrator says, here's what happens to you, which is a really strange kind of a thing. We usually don't talk that way. But it does something to the story. It gets us to think about it rather differently. On some level, it kind of pulls us into the story. We're involved with it because the narrator is saying, here's what happens to you, or maybe more accurately, imagine that this were happening to you. So think about that, and then as one of the questions for How to Date a Brown Girl, I want you to rewrite the first two paragraphs of the story in a different point of view. I want you to rewrite it either in the first person or in the third person. And I give you examples of how the first sentence could be rewritten like that, but then I want you to go through and rewrite the first two paragraphs. So work through that. We'll see where you get. And again, as always, if you have any questions, make sure to ask me.